Perfect. So welcome everyone. I'm Ed Potasnik, he, him, Executive Director with New Jersey LCV. Together with New Jersey Sierra Club chapter, we're bringing you breaking down the price surge for your electric bills and finding solutions. We're really pleased to have co-sponsors with us, New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, and also the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council. If you're joining us and you have any questions, there's a Q&A feature that we're going to be using, and you feel free to put any of your questions in there. And at the end of the presentations, we'll have a chance to have a conversation around them. We're really pleased again to have you with us. Since our founding here at New Jersey LCV, we've led successful efforts to protect our air, water, and lands. We've fought for policies that curb pollution, mitigate climate change, and advance environmental justice. And we're here today to discuss an urgent and important issue with you. And I'm sure that's why you're here today too, which is our energy and how affordable it is and how we can make it more affordable. We want to examine why energy costs are soaring, and most importantly, what we all can do about it. I'm joined, as I mentioned, by our guests, Angeli Ramos, a state director of the New Jersey Sierra Club chapter, and Henry Guida, the chief of external affairs at the Board of Public Utilities in New Jersey, overseeing the Division of Communication, Legislative Affairs, and he's also an ombuds person. We also have with us Mike Winka, who's a subject matter expert and is going to be able to answer some of the questions from our audience in the Q&A as well. So feel free to ask those there. A little bit about our panelists. So Angeli Ramos is state director for New Jersey chapter of Sierra Club and a longstanding environmental scientist and activist. Angeli earned her bachelor's degree in chemistry from the University of Puerto Rico before getting her master's in environmental chemistry and air pollution science and technology from Rutgers University, my alma mater. With previous experience at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection as both a climate change researcher and an air quality specialist, Angeli has a depth of knowledge on how the climate crisis impacts residents right here in New Jersey. In her time at the New Jersey chapter of Sierra Club, she served as the air quality issues coordinator and the chapter director, and led and mobilized hundreds of volunteers to stand for offshore wind and clean energy. She fought to shut down the expansion of natural gas power plants and marked the end of coal here in New Jersey forever. Henry Guida is the Chief of External Affairs for the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. He oversees, as I mentioned, the Division of Communications and Legislative Affairs, and as an ombuds person. Before his current role, Henry was the Deputy Chief of Staff, and he led the agency's efforts to apply for over $750 million in federal funding and directly manage state policies and research initiatives. Before state service, he served as the Public Policy Director at New Jersey LCV, driving environmental legislation and action through strategic advocacy, lobbying, and coordinated coalition build. Henry earned a Master's of Science in Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management from the New School and has an extensive background in climate, clean energy, and urban policy research and analysis. Let's start by describing sort of where we are at this moment. In the past few months, many of you have heard and seen that the costs on our energy bills are going to rise. And particularly today, we're talking about the electricity portion of your energy bills. Inflation and times are hard for all of us, and this is really going to be a pinch for working families. So we're really here tonight to discuss why the cost of our electricity is increasing and what we can do to fix it. We know that most of our energy comes from unreliable sources like oil and gas, and not only are they unreliable, they're also subject to market volatility. Things like the war of Russian aggression in the Ukraine have skyrocketed oil and gas prices. We also know that the regional authority, known as PJM, which votes on and determines energy prices, continues to support oil and gas energy as a source for our production of electricity. And these choices are causing our energy prices to rise, not to mention the health impacts such as heart attacks, cancer, and asthma that come from breathing dirty air. But the cheapest form of energy is clean energy. Right now, the cheapest form of energy is not just all of our clean energy, but particularly is solar, and it's predicted to get a lot cheaper. So moving to clean energy will protect ratepayers and give them cheaper energy costs that they deserve, while also protecting the health of all New Jerseyans, and especially in environmental justice communities that are suffering the brunt of air pollution, helping to clean up the air. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at a historical trend of where clean energy price, well, where energy prices have been by source. This goes back to 2009. The blue line is solar. In 2009, solar was really expensive, but by investing in solar and with scales of economy, as we were able to bring down the cost of the technology, that price dropped significantly. In fact, it is with onshore wind, the cheapest energy in 2023. The next most expensive energy is natural gas. It was a little more expensive. It went a little bit down, it's starting to rise again. And then coal right there, sort of in the middle. And then we see nuclear, which is the most expensive energy. And then the red line, that's the purple, is nuclear. And the red line is natural gas peaker plants. These are usually the dirtiest, but they also are paid to not run. So when you say per megawatt, when they're actually running, it's a lot more expensive because you pay them to sit there to not make any energy. But they do produce pollution, and so they sit waiting until a really high demand day, really cold day, but mostly really hot days. So this is kind of where we are right now with the cost of energy. And as you can see, solar and wind are the cheapest forms of energy, with solar having a great, a drop. And that's important for us historically to know as we're looking at new technologies like offshore wind, which also would similarly see some beginning higher prices with scales of economy over time. The other thing I'll mention too, just about renewable energy, clean energy, like solar and wind, their prices are more fixed, which means the contracts are guaranteed over the course of the life of the project. And so they're very predictable and not subject to the market fluctuations. So can we go back one slide? Because, the solution that we're listing here, and we'll hear more about this, is that clean energy is the cheapest option. It's already the most affordable, not only to buy, but also to build. And that if we can transition to clean energy, we can protect ratepayers and reduce air pollution and pollution to our water. Attacks on our clean energy from Washington, there's no shortage of the things that are coming out of this White House. Donald Trump is doubling down on dirty oil and gas. He's raising energy prices with a clean energy ban even further. And we can't afford to wait any longer to take matters into our own hand here in New Jersey. So we're going to get into some of the details about what's causing our rising costs and how we can pivot to protect our ratepayers, the climate, and public health. So if you go 2 slides ahead now, I'll kind of make it confusing. Here's what we're going to be doing. You're going to hear an overview of PJM and electricity price increases. You're going to hear a little bit about the importance of adding renewables and how we add them to the grid. We'll have an opportunity to get questions from you all. So in the bottom where it says Q&A, feel free to ask any questions that are on your mind as we're going through. And then we'll have some closing remarks and ask you to see if you can help us get involved. So with that, I'm going to have an opportunity now to hand it over to Henry with New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Henry, thanks so much for being here. Maybe you could tell us before you go into the slideshow, because I know you have a presentation. I mentioned your title, but on a daily basis, tell us a little bit about what do you do? What is your job like?
Thanks, Ed, and hi, everyone. My name is Henry Gaida. I'm the Chief of External Affairs at the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. So on a day-to-day basis, I think my role specifically can bounce around a little bit, but I focus on 3 main areas. One is I help oversee our Office of the Ombudsman. So our Ombudsman specifically focuses on municipal and business engagement. In fact, tomorrow at Bergen County Community College at the Lyndhurst campus, we're hosting a business breakfast summit. And the entire idea is around that is the clean energy program that the BPU helps administer has a variety of clean energy programs and cost saving programs that are available to businesses and municipalities. One saying that I always like to reflect on is a program is only as good as those who know about it. And so that is, we need people to know about the programs we have to help save money and make the investments that we want to see. And so that's one segment. Additionally, I also work with our Office of Communication to ensure that we're coordinated on all the things that we're communicating and getting our biggest messages out. And then lastly, I help work on all of our legislative affairs. So that's working with the state legislature, that's working with our federal delegation, and helping ensure that any bills or legislation or policies that are moving forward are aligned with state policy and, in fact, something that the BPU can help usher over the finish line. And so, a little widespread, but all in all, state service is amazing. I'm sure Angeli can attest to that as well. And so if you are interested, we're always hiring. So please feel free to jump on over.
Awesome. Thank you. And now to the more formal
And now
presentation.
yeah, sure. So I'll go from a little bit about me to a little bit about the BPU. So the board does effectively two things. One, we're the primary energy regulator in the state. We're the folks who oversee your electric and gas bills. And then separately, we also serve as the state energy office for the state of New Jersey. Our arrangement as both a regulator and state energy office is quite unique throughout the country. I believe there might be only one other state that has our similar arrangement, but the way we're organized does actually have some advantages and synergies. And so one is we're able to work more closely with our utilities to help implement programs that can help yield cost savings and ensure that we're meeting policy objectives that we have in place. But additionally, it also helps provide us a little bit more insight into some barriers that may currently exist with programs that we're trying to advance. And so I like to say it's pretty beneficial. But moving forward to the next slide, as I said, we are the state's primary energy regulator. And we're the folks who help oversee your electric and gas bill. Today, we're solely focusing on electric, and so that's what this slide is looking at. But I want to make one thing very clear. On your electric bill, there's typically two things on it. One is a distribution charge, and the other is a supply charge. The board solely regulates the distribution charges that you see. So these charges typically average around 39% of your average bill. That can vary based on the electric distribution company that you have. I live in Jersey City, so I have PSE&G. And so depending on where you are in the state, that percentage might be a little bit higher or lower. But these are the charges that go to support the infrastructure in the state to help get reliable electricity. It's the poles on the wires. It's if you're a natural gas customer, it's helping ensure that that gas mains are updated and safe. So things like infrastructure investments. Additionally, there's customer account services. This is where you'll find your taxes and fees, but also the societal benefits charge, or the SBC. This is what directly funds the clean energy program and supports investments in energy efficiency, utility assistance, and other initiatives that help advance state policy. This is the section of the bill where your utility receives basically a return on some expenditures that they make and helps drive them then to further their business case. Separately, on your bill, you have a supply charge. And this is where PJM comes in. I'll talk a little bit more about PJM on the next slide, but I want to make one thing very clear. You don't need to know what PJM is. If you do know what PJM is, that's really great. But what people really want is reliable electricity. People want affordable electricity. And at the BPU, I'm sure everyone on this webinar has heard about the anticipated increases that we're slated to see later this summer. But those increases are directly related to supply charges. Your supply charges are the biggest percentage of your electricity bill. Your electric utility does not make any money on it. It's basically a pass-through. And this charge reflects the actual price of a commodity. So it reflects the actual price of electricity, just like when you go to a grocery store and you have to buy eggs, or if you have to go and buy gasoline. And so throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about these supply charges, what we're trying to do to help bring those costs down, to reduce shock that folks are slated to experience. But more importantly, even though we don't regulate this, we're a state agency and we have a responsibility to ensure that we're putting energy affordability within reach and that we're ensuring that folks know that we are here to help. And so if we move to the next slide, I'm just going to dive a little bit more deeply into PJM. This is I think kind of like a small and sort of complex image here that you'll see on the right of your screen with some different colors and some different names or abbreviations. But effectively, this is a map of PJM's region. So PJM serves as a regional transmission operator. Effectively, they just coordinate electricity over transmission lines across 13 states and Washington, D.C. It's the largest RTO for short in the United States, and it's actually the oldest RTO in the world. I always like to say that all roads lead back to New Jersey, and PJM literally stands for the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, and it just reflected the first three states that effectively started this RTO. PJM is regulated by the Federal Energy and Regulatory Commission, which is an independent federal agency that oversees all of the RTOs throughout the country and ensures that the rules that market mechanisms that they're putting in place are consistent and other oversight provisions. But this is where the issue starts to emerge. PJM is responsible for planning. They're a regional transmission operator. And so, as an operator, you typically want to know where there's generation being built, where the electrons, are starting and where they're going and, who's using those electrons and ensuring that there's enough of those electrons on the grid to ensure that I can turn my light on or off, or you or someone on this call might be able to plug in their EV or heat their home. And so while that is a complex job, things have changed drastically over the last few years, and specifically within the last 3 to 5. Demand has been skyrocketing, and to the tune where projected growth from PJM growth is projected to grow by nearly 40% over the next 14 years. And just in the next 5, we're expected to need 10 gigawatts of new supply to at least keep pace with the anticipated new demand. In the next few slides, I'll talk about some of the reasons for this demand. And so this is on this slide. PJM, as I said, they help determine the supply of electricity. And they run a market called the reliability pricing model, which seeks to ensure long-term grid reliability by securing adequate resources needed to meet future predicted demand. So I think now you're probably starting to see where some of this complication is coming into place. They're doing some planning. Demand is changing rapidly, and there's new needs coming into place. And so it's rapidly throwing some of their projections into a little bit of disarray. And markets like reliability. Markets don't like chaos. And so we're experiencing some of that shock right now. This energy demand is largely, the growth in it is largely being driven by data center growth in Virginia and Ohio. Virginia has the most data centers in the entire world, and 70% of the world's internet traffic actually goes through those data centers. But also things like onshoring of new manufacturing and some decarbonization policy is also leading to demand increases now, but more so in the future. And so while there is some uncertainty in the planning that PJM does to inform markets that they run, which then determine the supply and price of electricity, a number of flaws have been prevalent with the way that they run their market. And it's actually these flaws that are costing New Jersey ratepayers, and they're costing New Jersey ratepayers to the tune of about $800 million over the next year. And these flaws are the biggest single driver of the increases that we're going to see starting in the summer. And so on the next slide is where I start talking about what some of these flaws are. But more importantly, it's one thing to shape a market, but we also need new electrons. And so on top of their planning responsibilities, PJM, they also run basically they determine where and when projects can plug in. And these are really big projects. These aren't, solar panels on your roof, but these are, let's say solar panels on a variety of warehouse roofs or an offshore wind array or a nuclear power plant. These are really big projects where some thought and care needs to go into when and how they're plugged in and ensure the infrastructure is available to help support that electricity. But PJM is incredibly backlogged. Effectively, there's a lot of projects trying to plug in and they're not able to keep up with that demand. And the backlog is so prevalent that they're working on requests from 2021 still. A new service request entering their queue today is not slated to receive a service agreement until approximately 2027. So even though we need electricity now, even if we try and build a really big power plant or a nuclear facility or offshore wind farm, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be able to plug in as soon as possible. There's actually a wait to be able to plug it in. And in this queue, there's about 1,600 projects. There's 79 alone in New Jersey, and about 96% of all these projects are clean energy. That represents a ton of clean energy capacity that's waiting to be plugged in. Granted, to be clear, not every single one of these projects will, start. Not every single one of these projects will start to generate electricity, but they do. A lot of these projects will and will help reduce demand costs. One thing I want to make very clear is that even though the queue is made up primarily of clean energy growth, or clean energy projects, there still has been a considerable amount of clean energy growth, and that growth has saved ratepayer money. Without those clean resources entering the market, capacity prices could have been about 60% higher, costing an additional $1 billion in the coming year. So growth that we've seen in New Jersey, growth that we've seen throughout the region have driven down prices and are saving us money right now. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the actions we've taken to help fix the market. And on these next few slides, there's going to be a lot of words, probably words that might be a little complicated, but I'm going to break it down and explain it as best I can. But all in all, we've been tracking what's been happening at PJM since this administration started, and more importantly, after an auction last year where prices for reliability skyrocketed by over 800%. We, within 30 days, hightailed comments and feedback on market reforms for PJM to improve the way that they run their market and put substantial downward pressure down on future capacity prices. There's 3 specific reforms, one of which solely looks to just expand what can be included in supply. There's some power plants that currently exist that weren't included in some of their calculations, and the less supply that you're including in your calculations typically means prices are going to go up. So we were trying to expand what was included to help bring prices down. Additionally, we changed the baseline for how they measured a specific reference resource that helps set the price for electricity. This is kind of wonky, but all in all, this is basically we helped change. We helped reform their market by implementing some different financial accounting for resources that were entering their supply market, and ultimately helping reduce costs for ratepayers. And on this next slide, the third reform that we've advanced is a really important one, but for a few reasons, renewables and storage weren't allowed to participate in the capacity market. We removed some. We're able to remove some of those restrictions, which allowed even more of these projects to be counted. And thus, as I noted before, we see that clean energy growth is driving down prices. We've now made it easier for more clean energy to participate in our capacity markets and drive down costs. We've submitted a number of filings at FERC, and we've been very, very active at PJM, and we're really proud of the reforms that we've accomplished. And these reforms have helped save New Jersey ratepayers alone $1 to $3 billion in the next auction that occurs, and that auction is going to happen later this summer. That auction will then set the prices for another auction, which directly relates to the amount of that we pay for electricity. So it is a little complicated, and there's a lot of levers and some of these like amorphous quasi-governmental bodies, but it is a complex system, and so we have really incredible staff that are helping manage and tracking all of the things that these different bodies are doing and ensuring that New Jersey ratepayers are staying at top of mind, and energy affordability has never wavered in terms of one of our priorities. And so if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit more about what we're doing in the state to help drive down costs and put energy affordability into reach for more families. So first, this has been the last 7 years have been all banner years for the solar industry in the state. We crossed the 5 gigawatt threshold in December, which effectively means we've doubled the amount of solar in our installed in the state since Governor Murphy took office. That is a huge accomplishment, and in January, we were able to celebrate with Angeli at a recently completed municipal project in Secaucus it's actually pretty cool. It's their town ice rink. This just goes to show that, solar isn't just, it's not like a small niche project, but in fact, provides benefits to a variety of customers, whether it's a household or a municipality or a business. Additionally, one of the things that's helped solar grow so fast is something called our CSI program, or our competitive solar incentive program. Last year, we awarded over 300 megawatts of the cheapest solar we've ever awarded, and basically proved that solar can be developed competitively. And within that program, we were able to award also 80 megawatts of storage. We have a nation-leading community solar program, and so if you subscribe, you're guaranteed to save at least 15% on your electricity bill. And so if you're a low or moderate income utility ratepayer, this is something you should highly consider, because that's guaranteed an immediate savings. And then lastly, we've worked very hard to get offshore wind off our shores, to get our energy storage program set up, which, there will be some updates happening pretty soon about that. And then also ensuring the grid can handle all these new resources coming online. But aside from that, is we still understand that people have to pay their bills and sticker shock happens. And we take the responsibility very seriously about helping ensure that people aren't having to pick and choose what bill they pay this month. And we are committed to helping those who need it. For instance, last year, we were really proud to unveil a residential energy assistance payment, or REAP for short. We want people to reap the benefits of the clean energy transition, and we helped disperse $48.7 million to over 278,000 New Jersey families. It was a one-time $175 bill credit that helped alleviate some price increases that folks were experiencing last year. Additionally, outside of REAP, we also administered over $295 million through our energy assistance programs. Once again, this is real money going into people's hands and helping reduce the impacts of rate increases that they might see or are slated to see. And then lastly, and very importantly, yesterday at our board meeting, the board approved an energy affordability report over the last year. This has been a year-long process where we wanted to conduct a comprehensive study of our energy assistance programs and also identify a number of other opportunities for ratepayer savings. And today we released a straw proposal on potential Universal Services Fund changes. USF is a huge customer assistance program that we have. It does not only just apply to low-income customers, it applies to moderate-income customers as well, or middle-income customers. And we highly encourage everyone here to take a look at that straw proposal and provide feedback. And then lastly, we talk a lot about supply and trying to get more electrons on the grid. But lastly, energy efficiency is really important. We also need to identify opportunities to reduce demand growth. Today, we had a press conference to celebrate the ACEEE's ranking of New Jersey's first time in 2 decades in the top 10. We're ranked number 8th. But we also led the nation in the amount of energy efficiency savings, which is really exciting. And all in all, the state's energy efficiency programs have helped save over $600 million in utility bill reductions. So that's really exciting. Not going to mention the environmental benefits, but affordability has always been top of mind, and we're committed to achieving that for New Jersey ratepayers. And my last slide, just to provide some last closing thoughts. Just to be clear, the anticipated rate increases, they're not welcome news. I'm a New Jersey ratepayer. My parents are New Jersey ratepayers. My grandparents are New Jersey ratepayers. I'm in the market to buy a house, and the first question I asked was, "What are the utility bills?" And that was before the recent auction took place, and so that jump in what I'm going to have to pay for a house, if fingers crossed, if my wife and I are able to get it, that's a real bill. That's something that you have to pay every month, and that's a real financial commitment. And so I feel the pain, we feel the pain, and please know that we are in fact here to help. I said this before, most people don't know what PJM is, but you shouldn't have to. Um, and I'll just finish with, we are here to help. If you or someone you know is looking for energy assistance or think that they might need it, please feel free to reach out. I think I might have went a few 4 minutes over, but I'll stop there and I'll hand it over to Angeli.
Just 14 minutes. We weren't timing, but thank you. There was a lot of information. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We're going to get through as much as we can here and get through as many questions as we can. I think some of them are being answered by the presentation. It's nice work. And the director of the Sierra Club, Angeli Ramos, thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Henry. Hi, everybody. Angeli Ramos, pronouns she, her, as Ed said, New Jersey Sierra Club director. And my portion of the presentation is going to focus on the myths, the facts, and the solutions. Next slide. So something that we hear quite frequently, and to be honest, something that makes me incredibly upset, is that the rising electricity prices in the PJM region are caused by the transition to renewable energy. Basically, clean energy is what's driving these crazy costs. That is a lie. The fact is that fossil fuel companies falsely blame renewable energy transitions for price hikes to push more fracking and gas burning power plants. However, PJM's current resource mix is overwhelmingly coal and gas, with wind and solar representing less than 4% of the overall mix. So basically, out of the entire amount of energy sources across this enormous region, only 4% actually is represented by clean energy sources like solar and wind. It doesn't make sense, right? Make it make sense. It doesn't. There is no way that renewable and clean energy sources are responsible for the price hikes that we are currently experiencing and that we will continue to experience. So basically, a more balanced energy market with clean energy sources leads to greater price stability, and it's less affected by global events like Ed was mentioning at the beginning, such as geopolitical conflicts and international gas demand. Next slide. So basically, to expand a little bit further and to provide some examples to a lot of the very technical and difficult things that Henry was explaining earlier, PJM interconnection basically means poor planning, bad process, lack of transparency, and a big lack of clean energy projects in our grid. So these has led to failure to replace old, inefficient, and costly coal-fired power plants with modern alternatives, and a failure to include those coal plants in the electricity market. And I will explain that further. So starting this June, as mentioned earlier, due to the capacity auction conducted just this past summer of 2024, customers in the PJM grid are expected to collectively pay $14.7 billion for their electricity delivery, compared to $2.2 billion after the previous auction. So it's a huge price increase, about 800% just from one capacity auction to the other. This, of course, has resulted in intense scrutiny because no one can explain this. What is going on? PJM, please provide answers to this problem. But particularly from states like New Jersey and states in the grid that have very aggressive clean energy goals and emission reductions goals. If you really think about it, right, to what Henry was mentioning earlier, the PJM queue has a lot of clean energy projects being stuck and waiting to be interconnected. When you think about the states that are actually proposing to interconnect those projects, it tends to be the states like us that actually want to transition to clean energy and that we actually have goals to do so. Next slide. So PJM is dragging its feet on the clean energy transition and doing everything it can to help fossil fuel plants online. So not only is there lack of planning, lack of transparency, there is also an enormous bias towards fossil fuel power generation. And ultimately, the people that suffer is the ratepayers. It's us. And we suffer with pollution, we suffer with poor public health, and we suffer because of energy affordability. So I'm gonna walk you through an example of what this reliability must run and the capacity auction and all of this. What does it even mean, and why are we being impacted so severely? So this is Brandon Shores. You can see the picture on the left. Brandon Shores and Wagner, two different coal-fired power plants in Maryland. And you must be wondering, what does that have to do with people in New Jersey, and what do I pay for my electricity? Well, Maryland is part of the PJM grid, and anything that happens in any of these 13 states and DC has an impact on every single one of us. So back in 2020, Sierra Club actually signed a legal agreement with Talon Energy. So basically the company that owns these coal-fired power plants, to stop burning coal, because that's, beyond coal, that's what Sierra Club does, at Brandon Shores, Wagner, and another power plant. Talon, the energy company, announced that it planned to convert the Brandon Shores and Wagner from coal to oil. Obviously, we did not like that. We're still burning fossil fuels. Oil is incredibly dirty. So in 2023 and 2024, they independently decided that they actually wanted to retire the power plants because it no longer made financial sense to keep them running. So, I mean, we're seeing this across the nation over and over again, even in New Jersey with Logan and Chambers, down in South Jersey. It is not financially feasible or convenient to keep operating coal-fired power plants. So, unfortunately, even though the company wanted to do this, PJM responded by saying it will not have the capacity to provide that reliable energy for its customers without the energy generated by the two coal-fired power plants. So here you can see PJM's inability of future planning, right? If you know that these power plants, and they do know, are inefficient and it really doesn't make sense to operate them, that's the sort of thing that you should be planning into the future as to like, how are we going to replace that power generation? Perhaps by actually interconnecting the projects that have been in the queue for a very long time. Next slide. So due to this PJM response, they basically came up with a Band-Aid type of solution. So Brandon Shores and Wagner enter into a reliability must-run contract with PJM, which basically provides a solution for PJM that will charge its customers, so you and me, to keep these two power plants operating until PJM has the infrastructure and the capacity to provide reliable energy without these two coal-fired power plants. So what you need to understand from this is that these power plants are no longer running continuously because it doesn't make sense, but they are there as a peaking source of power to give PJM the time and the capacity to get to the point that they're no longer needed, and we are paying for it. So even though 65 million customers were paying every month to keep Brandon Shores and Wagner open, PJM was not included the energy generated at these sites in their quarterly capacity auctions. So 65 million people, everybody in the PJM region, including New Jersey. Basically, in these capacity auctions, PJM is not even including these reliability must-run power plants, artificially creating a scarcity of electricity, right? Because if you are actually not considering what you can generate in your grid, in your capacity auction, you're artificially driving the prices up. And so that ultimately drives our electricity and our utility bills up and causes an energy burden situation. So ironically, the coal-fired power plant, to put salt to injury, has no performance obligation. So not only are they being paid to just stay there waiting and then providing electricity when they're needed, they're actually not required. There's no accountability mechanism if they cannot provide that power. So basically, if we're hitting a peak time and PJM is like, hey, Brandon Shores, we need you to run, they can basically say, oh, sorry, we can't, like, because of X, Y, and Z. And it's perfectly fine. And they keep receiving this money from people like you and me, ratepayers across the region. So under this agreement, both power plants will operate until May of 2029 and received $145 million and 35 million annually from ratepayer funds. So that 145 for one plant and 35 for another. In addition to other reimbursement and fuel and maintenance. This is a significant amount of money. And the Maryland Office of the People's Counsel report found that the company's revenues for 2025 to 2026 are projected to be $360 million higher than what they would have made if they would have stayed in the regular capacity market. So what you're learning from this is PJM's lack of planning, PJM's prioritizing keeping online fossil fuels inefficient, dirty, and not financially viable. We are paying for it, even more money that if they actually would have stayed in the capacity auction. They're not being included in the capacity auction, which artificially drives prices up because it makes it seem that we actually have less electricity in the supply, right? Next slide. So basically, what can we do? States and governors can pressure and create change. In a complaint written by Governor Shapiro, and I'm going to try to speed this up because it's 6:46. So Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania called this practice the potentially the largest unjust wealth transfer in the history of the United States energy markets. So basically, Governor Shapiro filed a complaint with FERC and PJM, and with the support of various governors, including Governor Murphy in the PJM region, and various consumer groups, including Sierra Club as well, to address this self-manufacturer scarcity issue. And PJM has finally agreed through negotiations with Governor Shapiro to a price cap for its customers. It came a ceiling and a floor. There's some issues with that, but in the interest of time and also to avoid the wonkiness, I'm not going to go into that. But particularly PJM and Governor Shapiro really reach a solid agreement that has some benefits, right? They are estimating that with this reduced cap, customers in the 13 states and DC and PJM can save $21 billion over just the next 2 years. And this is just applicable for the future capacity auction starting in this summer of 2025, not applicable to what just happened last year, which is what we're going to be hitting, with the prices increasing in the summer. So as you can see, this is a perfect example of what a governor can do with negotiating with PJM. And this is with the support of Governor Murphy and other governors. We can create change if we pressure our elected officials, our governors, to actually prioritize change with PJM. Next slide. So how can New Jersey put some pressure into change? Generation of 100% clean electricity is the necessary step in the solution, right? There's PJM reform. There's a lot of things that need to happen with the interconnection queue and the capacity market. But ultimately, it is up to the states to ensure that we're generating enough clean electricity to actually push out all that coal fire burning power plants and natural gas burning power plants, excuse me. So we need to displace that dirty energy in order to create change. And that can only happen if in state we are generating more clean electricity. So why clean electricity? More affordable, not subject to global market volatility, as Ed explained earlier, because it's, controlled by us, no carbon pollution and no associated co-pollution. Because, right, we're not burning dirty carbon and dirty oil or gas. So key statistics on clean energy prices: electricity from solar and wind is now half the cost of coal and gas power. had just 30% of the renewable projects stocked currently in the PJM queue for the last 5 years been operational, so meaning if PJM would have actually interconnected them, an additional 7 gigs of supply would have entered the capacity market, and this could have reduced prices by up to 63% by everybody in the PJM grid. Next slide.
Anjali, hold on. Can you go back 1 second?
Sure.
Can you say that last line in yellow again? Because it's in yellow doesn't mean it's not important. It should be like in skywriting with a plane. How much would it have saved if 30% of the renewable projects in the last auction were actually turned on?
Up to 63%.
Thank you. I want to underscore that. It's like a highlight, but it's hard to see with my eyes. So,
Okay. Next slide. So policy recommendations, speed up renewable integration. PJM needs to clear up the backlog of 268 gigawatts of power. That is millions and millions of homes being powered, but with clean energy, just waiting to be approved. And then, of course, support renewable energy development in the states, right? We need to strengthen incentives for solar, even though BPU is doing a great job, but we need more than that. We need triple, double, quadruple, you name it, of more solar and more renewable energy. And wind, we really need to get going with wind here in New Jersey and other renewable energy sources. Somebody is not on mute. It might be you.
that was me. I'm sorry.
And so to ensure a more diverse energy mix that lowers long-term costs. Next slide. So bottom line, New Jersey lawmakers, electric utilities, and PJM grid managers must end this reliance on aging, expensive, dirty, polluting fossil fuel power plants and prioritize clean energy solutions. New Jersey needs to enact 100% clean electricity by 2035 into law. We need to generate the clean electricity here in New Jersey. We need to displace that dirty energy, and we need to force PJM to get their act together and really interconnect what is going to create enormous benefits, economic, but most importantly, public health, and for all of our communities. And I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Q&A.
Awesome. So in the chat, you see a link to take action to send a message to your elected official to pass a 100% clean electricity bill to codify Governor Murphy's Executive Order 319, which committed the state to 100% clean electricity because it's the cheapest energy. So it's cheaper. And that makes a big difference. And today, what we're talking about affordability. So we have lots of questions. Henry's back. Angelique, thank you so much, both of you. I'm monitoring the chat. We had a great job of answering a lot of the questions. So first one that was like came up a lot. Phoebe, Nan, and Dan all asked, like, why is the amount of energy going up that we need, right? Why do we need more energy? Mike shared some of this, but maybe folks can share more. Not so much that New Jersey has a higher amount of demand. Actually, we've been pretty stable, but there are a lot of data centers that are going in Virginia, and that demand across the whole grid is putting pressure on things. But a finer point, anything else we want to say on where we're going with demand and where we see our state contributing to the future needs?
I could take that.
Be great. Thank you.
Sure. So that's a really great question. I do think it's always interesting to see how, even though trends might not be perfectly reflected in New Jersey, we're still part of this 14 jurisdiction regional grid, and so it's typically worked where during like the big storms happen and some generation goes out in one area, we benefit from the generation that's happening in a different area. And it's typically worked that way. Reliability has been met, but we're now kind of seeing the flip side of that story where a lot of new demand is coming online in specific areas. And so a lot more electrons are flowing to those areas, and it's leading to cost increases for everyone because we're all part of the same swimming pool. In terms of helping manage that demand, well, New Jersey has our energy efficiency programs, which helps levelize some of those peaks and valleys of what we would be paying for and how much we're using. But we are seeing some demand growth. New Jersey does have a few select data centers. They're not like these really big ones or hyperscalers that we're seeing out west. But we also do have, manufacturing coming here. Population growth throughout the region is also a factor. But by and large, it's largely driven by these big data centers that are gigantic. They use a lot of electricity, but also things like manufacturing. We're starting to see the impacts of some electrification policies start, decarbonization policies, but that's really that's like a now and over the next few years as policies are implemented. But in terms of kind of managing and getting more electrons on the grid, solar is really important. Storage is really important. Offshore wind offers a really great opportunity to help get large amounts of electrons on the grid faster than really any other resources. New Jersey's really blessed because we have a lot of nuclear, and that's really exciting. It's a huge piece of our carbon-free generation, but it's also nuclear makes up, I believe, a little bit over 20 or 25% of all of PJM's generation in general. And so we play a really big piece in the decarbonization efforts over all these states because of those plants. And so we have a lot going on here. We're not insulated from all of these factors, but we are doing our part to try and get more electrons onto the grid.
And we also anticipate with the modeling in the future that more electricity is going to be needed as we electrify more things. So we get our dirty cars off the street and we get on ones that are running on electricity. That is going to require more electricity. If we move or away from oil or gas heating our homes to more efficient, cost-saving, affordable, saves all kinds of money. Heat pumps, that's going to require more electricity. So we have to plan for the future in those things. There were some practical questions that came up. So Juliana asked about okay, I have community solar today. Community solar is a great way for you to save money. It's if you can't put solar panels on your own roof because it's shaped weird or in a condo complex and they don't allow it, etc. Community solar is where they put it on something somewhere else. You subscribe and you get the benefits. And usually it comes at a discount, anywhere from 10 to 21% or more of a discount. With these energy rates going up, almost 20%, right? This coming summer. What happens to that? Is that going to affect folks that have community solar? Angeline, do you want to take that one? Or is that unfair?
I'll
go to Henry. I'll go back to Henry. No, Henry, if I'm subscribed to nuclear
Yeah,
solar.
so if you're
Community
subscribed
solar.
to community solar, you're going to see rate increases.
Oh. No, I was
they'll
going to say,
see-
I don't know that answer. So Henry.
No, I do. So typically your bill is two things. It's the distribution and the supply costs. Your distribution doesn't change. That's what we pay the utility because that is, that's going into all the infrastructure investments. But the community solar, it should save you more money in the long run because generally those are contracted prices. I think it varies probably based on the contract you have. So just like if you're getting approached by a third-party supplier, if you're not familiar with looking at contracts, please have someone look at a contract with you just to ensure that you know what you're potentially signing. But typically, yeah, long-term savings.
Thank you. You really should look at your contract because it depends on the percentage and sort of how it all is working. There were a number of questions in here too that are practical. What can I do to save money on my own bill? If I put up my own solar panels, or I have 100% of my electricity being provided by solar, are these rate increases going to impact me?
So yes, they can. And the reason is because if your solar isn't covering all of the electricity that you're using, that marginal use that you're getting from the grid it costs more. And so while you're still saving a lot of money because you have solar, you still might see larger bills on months where you're using a lot of electricity.
Unless you're producing all your own, then it doesn't matter what happens somewhere else. The easiest way or the best way to save energy is to have better energy efficiency, right? That's weatherizing your home, getting rid of rattling doors and windows, insulating your home, because the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. It's the energy you save with that energy efficiency. If you're not using it in the first place, the rate increase doesn't affect you. But we know that's not reality. You're not going to go to zero by insulating every little thing. You're going to use more energy. I think at least what Angeli at Sierra Club and us at New Jersey LCV are doing is really trying to lay out to you the facts. That statistic we went back to, that if 30% of the clean energy projects were hooked up at the last auction, we would have seen 63% cheaper rates than the 20% increase we're seeing today. That's massive. The 100% clean energy legislation by 2035 is going to help us to reduce prices, clean up our air, less asthma, cancer, and heart disease, and ultimately put us on a path to energy independence where New Jersey can be a clean energy exporter, even with rising demand of data centers, even with electrification, which we want to see to drive down emissions. But it's in our hands. Like, we need all of you to get more involved. So please send a link to your an email to your legislator. I want to thank Angeli for co-sponsoring today, for being an awesome colleague and all of her work. Henry, all the work that you guys are doing at the Board of Public Utilities, to your boss, President Sadovi, and the commissioners there. Thank you for keeping moving forward on the right path for us as a state that'll help lower costs, clean up our air, and make New Jersey and keep it competitive. So with that, I'm going to end us on time here at 7 o'clock. We were able to get a lot of the Q&A done in the chat. This will not be the last time we talk about these issues, so please join us on a future one. And everyone have a really great night. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Take care, all.